Welcome to the Resilience Sucks podcast, brought to you by the Adaptability Movement. I'm Ben.
And I'm Dan.
And we're here to give you resources and tools to help you go from a state of surviving to thriving in life.
Resilience sucks the life out of you. And while it's a necessary skill, it's one that we don't want to spend too much time in or we run out of capacity. We're here to talk to you more about how to adapt and find the opportunity in change so you can really go about thriving in your own life.
Welcome to the Resilience Sucks podcast. Today we're with Mark Aiston. So Mark is a former Channel 10 news presenter and current GM of Radio Italia Uno in Adelaide. So Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And we're here today to explore a bit of a story with yourself, and there's been a journey that you've gone through in life, particularly over the last 5 to 6 years, has been quite profound, and one that's rooted in addiction and about going through a process of some loss, some grief, and sort of the rising from the ashes almost of that, isn't it? So what I'm really keen to do today is throw to you a little bit, just to give the viewers and listeners a little bit more background on sort of where you were leading into that, and then let's go deep.
Yeah, that sounds good. It's a great way to start, Dan. So just in a very general sense, and I'm obviously conscious of time and the structure of how you put these together, so I won't ramble on, but just to give you a bit of context, so I lived with my grandparents when I was young. Mum was around, so was Dad, but Mum was very unwell. She was in and out of Glenside, which a lot of your listeners and viewers may not be across. It was a mental institution.
Yep.
Back in the 60s and 70s on Glen Osmond Road, on Fullerton Road, corner of Glen Osmond and Fullerton. So Mum was in and out of Glenside for much of my younger years, and when I was conscious of what I was doing as a human being, so from 5 till 18, 19. So I had a bit of an unusual background in the sense that, as I say, I lived with my grandparents, plus Mum, plus Dad, then Kathy came along, my sister, and then my brother. And that was in the late 60s, early 70s. Now, having said all of that, I loved it because I wasn't aware of what was going on. I mean, I loved living with, grandma and grandpa and, sort of having 2 sets of parents, really. Yeah. Did I know Mum was unwell? No, of course not. Certainly not at that age. So and that went on for 7 or 8 years, and then obviously, going to primary school and then going to high school and stuff like that. Didn't do all that well at school, and at the age of 13 and a half, 14, left school and started working for my father. And Dad had a gym, which sounds great, but it was in a very unusual location in Adelaide. It was in Hiney Street, and back in those days, Hiney Street was totally different to how it is now. I mean, it was great fun again. I loved it. I lived for it. But I was in amongst prostitutes, pimps, drug dealers, drug addicts, criminals, con men, bikies, rockers, skinheads. I mean, it was really, really interesting. And for us, my father and I, who were well known, it was safe for us. I mean, it wasn't great for people just wandering down Hiney Street at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Yeah. So I worked for Dad for about 7 years in that environment. So I guess with a combination of both that early age stuff with Mum and, even though I felt it was okay living and often sleeping with my grandparents as well, because it was a small house, so that was a bit unusual as well. And then I had a pretty unusual upbringing. Sure. Again, I loved it, but it was very, very unusual. So that was, in a general sense, my upbringing until I started working. And then at 18, I started working on the race course as a bookmaker's clerk. So I worked for a bookmaker. They called it penciling. I then became interested in horse racing and having a bet, which actually occurred earlier than that at 14. But I became very serious about it when I was 18. I could do it legally. Yeah. And then I became interested in becoming a race caller. So again, in a general sense, just to give you a sense of my career, from about the age of 25 to about 27, I was calling races for 5DN. Then I went to Darwin for 2 years, got back from Darwin. Darwin was hectic, as you can probably imagine. I was single. There was a lot of fun up there. Got back from Darwin in 1982 and then started working at the ABC as a sports reporter and a presenter. And then did that until 96. And then from 96 through until 5 years ago, worked at Channel 10. And in between then, I worked at various radio stations. Yeah. So in a general sense, that's a very, very quick overview of my life in the early days and what I have done and still doing, obviously being involved with Radio Italia Uno, being involved in the media industry.
Yeah. And so I mean, that's comprehensive in terms of like, not, I think there'll be some people out there listening to this and will be like, they've had a pretty sanitized childhood and things have gone generally well for them and haven't had this sort of stuff. But
family dinners and Dad getting home at 5 o'clock and everyone. Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
but there'll be
None
others.
Of that for us.
No, right. And but there'll be many others that while they might not have the same story as you, they'll be like, well, my family wasn't the perfect Australian family or whatever you want to call it, and we had our flaws and our differences and things that were not outcast, but like the outer end of the threshold. Absolutely. Right? So I think it's really valuable to give people that background and to just understand a little bit more about kind of what leads to shaping us as human beings and also how we respond to that and how we adapt. So talk us through that, like what from growing up in that environment and getting into the race calling and the racing industry, like how did you make that transition into more of a media sort of pathway? Were there early signs of behaviours sort of in those sort of 18 to 30 where some of the stuff that's come around in the last 5 or 6 years in the way of addiction was manifesting?
No, it's a good question. So if we go back to when I was 14, I started having a bet when I was 14. My father was a punter, and I should have mentioned that earlier. Dad was a punter, loved his punting, had a bet to the last day he was on the planet. I think he actually lost on that day, but if you understand what I mean. Anyway, ran fourth. Couldn't get out. Anyway. So I started punting at 14, and I remember the 2 horses that I backed. I had 50. Dad put the bet on for me. I had 50 cents each way on a horse called Binta Bibi, and 50 cents each way on a horse called Coromandel Lorna. Now that means nothing to you, but the point is, both of them won. Yeah. And of course, that was good for me. I made a little bit of money, $6, $7, whatever it was. But I think what that probably did was that gave me whatever it was internally, it gave me a buzz. It wasn't necessarily about the $7, it just gave me a buzz. And so I remember quite vividly having a bet then on the Saturday with the $7 I'd won, and I lost. Yeah. Didn't have a collect. So I experienced very quickly back in those days, Dan, what it was like to win and what it was like to lose, punting-wise. Yeah. But obviously I obviously also understood very quickly what it was like to be in the very early stages of addiction. Now, we're just talking about gambling here. Yeah. I mean, I was drinking at that age and I was smoking dope at that age. But I guess for whatever reason, I have an addictive nature. And from that point on, I continue to bet. And whether I won or lost to a large degree is irrelevant. It's just that it became an instant addiction. Yeah. It became an instant addiction, and I loved it. Yeah. I absolutely lived for it. I lived for my drinking, and I lived for my smoking. I love that lifestyle. I just absolutely adored it. Then, of course, I was working for Dad at the time in High Street. So all of those things it was very unusual and very different, which is what I said at the start. But I guess the fact that I've got an addictive personality means that I have to be really careful about what I take up. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, before we even started, we're talking about all sorts of addictions. Well, you can be addicted to going to the gym. Yeah. And that might be great for a couple of years where you get yourself a really nice cut body and you get yourself a nice girlfriend as a result of it and you go into a competition. But if that becomes a complete addiction, then it's very, very, very dangerous. And so with all addictions, they affect the person, but they also affect people around them.
Agreed.
And so getting back to your original question, you got to remember, I'm 65 now. I mean, we're talking when I was 14. That's 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 50, 60. That's 50 years ago. So when you're doing something for such a long time, the addiction gets stronger. Yeah. The emotions start to change. The emotions are more intense, whether it be winning, losing, and there's a whole range of other emotions that come with it. Going to the TAB, going into the hotel to have the bet, watching them jump out of the barrier. Having your next drink, holding it in your hand. Yeah. I'm getting very, intimate here, visual here. Yeah. Rolling your joint. Yeah. Getting excited that it's really good stuff apparently, and I'm rolling it and then lighting it. It's not just the action, the end action. It's everything that comes with it.
Agreed.
So I think think as a result of that, with all of those three addictions I'm talking about, they're all super dangerous.
Yeah.
They're all super dangerous, and there comes a point where you're in it so deep, it's just part of your life.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that I was pissed on air when I was working at Channel 10 or stoned or using coke when I was presenting at the ABC. I didn't do any of that. I wasn't having bets while I was working. So it was controlled to a certain extent.
Yeah.
No, there's no doubt about that. I mean, I wasn't getting up in the morning searching for a beer at 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
I wasn't that sort of sort of addict. But of course, when I was doing all these things, and in the end I was doing all of them together, when I was doing these things, what occurred was that it obviously got to a point where it started to affect other people.
Yeah.
Of course it did, and there's I can go into that in detail, but in a general sense, those things affect other people in different ways. They affect you, and they affect other people. And when they start to affect other people, and they start to affect your work performance, they start to affect your honesty, your morals, they start to affect your memory, they start to affect your relationships with people, they start to affect whether or not you are on time. In other words, your own personal commitment to doing things and to compartmentalise your day and to be able to do stuff in a way like most people can, where you can concentrate for 8 hours and do your job. When it starts to affect you in that way, then you're on a bit of a slide.
Yeah.
You're on a slide. And I say, though, that it's easy to say, well, I should have done something about it, and in the end I didn't because it all fell apart. But even at that level, it's difficult. It's difficult to get hold of it. It's difficult to grab it by the scruff of the neck and say, enough's enough, I've got to get help.
Yeah.
Because you're so deeply entrenched in it, you just feel as though it's you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I can't pretend to understand what you've gone through, but like hearing some of the things you're saying, like it's something that it has a grip on you. It's because an addiction is just a habit that's out of control, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that's uncharacteristic or unfair to say. So
absolutely, it's dead accurate.
One of the things that we talk about, we do like a habits analysis within what we do with our business, and we look at sort of helpful, unhelpful, and sort of neutral, and kind of try and it's like that inverted U sort of, inverted U graph. And you sort of like, what you're trying to do is you're trying to sort of, mitigate things. So you're doing more of the good stuff, less of the bad stuff. And sort of, and it's not about going, okay, I have an addiction to chocolate and I'm going to eat apples now. It's about going, okay, well, I'm going to, minimize the chocolate because when I eat it in excess, it has this outcome, which is therefore means it's a more of a negative thing. I'm going to move more into the neutral, where it's a treat once a week or something.
Absolutely.
And so it's a pretty rudimentary kind of way of explaining it.
Yeah. But you have to think of it at that level.
Well, yeah, it's about understanding kind of actions, consequences. And the thing that's interesting to me, and I might just explore this a little bit more with you, is you mentioned about there was a certain amount of functionality to what you're doing for some time. Like you're able to manage that.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, what that says is that you mentioned having an addictive personality. I'm going to challenge a little bit, and I could be completely wrong here. But if you're able to moderate or modulate the addiction in that way because you place enough importance on something, you go, well, I'm going to compartmentalize it here and I'm only going to use it over here. Well, to me, that says that at every moment you have a conscious choice, and you actually were making a conscious choice in each of those situations. It was only once you lost control of that a little bit that it became such a problem that's when things started to sort of die for you.
Yeah. That's a fair point. And we spoke about this before we did the interview on Radio Italia Uno. And look, I agree with you in part, but I think if it was that simple, no one would have addictive issues, because they would perhaps get help from someone like you or a psychologist or a doctor, whoever it might be, and they would change it. I think look, I don't dispute what you're saying. I guess all I can do is use my own experience to say that I sort of know that, yet it's taken me 50 years to do something about it as a result of something that went wrong.
So when I say that, that's not to shame you by any means.
No.
It's actually to empower you, to say that at any moment, every one of those, so there will be an urge, I imagine. There'll be like, and a very strong urge, I'm guessing. Like that sort of, it would be so much easier to satisfy that than it would be to deny it, or that it would be
100%.
to change and do something else.
100%,
right?
and it's the easy way out.
Right.
100%.
What I guess I'm trying to demonstrate is that there have been times when you've done that, and there's been a lot of times where you've done that, which means you're capable of doing it. So there is a element
there.
There's something to build upon. It's not to say that it's
totally hopeless.
It's easy or it's it's available to everyone, but it's just to say that like once you become conscious and a little bit self-aware in that moment, you can acknowledge that I chose to do it this time, and that might be okay. Like that might have been the best thing for you in that moment, because had you not done that, it would have led to further harm, right? Or more immediate harm.
Yeah, I understand.
The whole thing is like, we never want to inflict harm on ourselves. However, sometimes we make choices that lead to that. Are you going to avoid the immediate harm now, or are you going to avoid you're going to choose to look at the long term first? Well, you're probably going to avoid the immediate stuff if it's right in your face.
Get that.
So it's absolutely not it's more about empowerment. It's more to say that here's a tool, here's a way of reflecting on your own self-worth that says that it exists within inside you, that there is elements of this that you can influence further, and that you've done that in the past.
As
to
long
celebrate
as you've got
that.
the tools and the knowledge.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is the thing: like we don't generally get taught this stuff. We don't get taught in school how to like budget. Generally we don't get taught how to make a meal. We do maths and science and whatever. But where are the life skills? Where are the coping strategies? Where are the
and you are alone.
Systems on how to process emotions in a healthy way rather than just suppressing and denying them. So. On that, in terms of the emotional sort of things, like you've obviously described some pretty, very significant things that have occurred throughout that sort of childhood and into your early sort of life. What has there been any reflection on, an emotion that's particularly kind of gripped you through this, or that maybe has influenced what the path that you've sort of taken, sort of in addiction, but also then rebounding out of it?
Well, and that's a good question too. It's a question without notice, but I think there probably is. There's a couple of things, and this will sound sort of weird, but on a whole range of levels, but. I've never, particularly when I was at school, even though I had a few mates, I had good mates, and everyone loved me because I was funny, but I never had a lot of confidence. In fact, a friend of mine that I went to school with 45 years ago, we caught up the other day, and we were talking about that. We were both saying how we were so 14 years of age, we liked each other, we never went out with each other, neither one of us had any confidence. So maybe I wasn't alone in that, but I was very, very self-conscious when I was young of myself and of my looks, and what I said, and a whole range of things. Now, why that's the case, I don't know. I've got a few ideas, but I don't know exactly. But the thing I was particularly unconfident about, or not confident about, was women. Yeah. And I found it really difficult to talk to women when I was young, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And I can remember... and of course, like a lot of people, I hate rejection. It's like being a salesman. You hate that no. But most people who are good salesmen say, no worries, your loss, move on to the next one. I can remember a girl liked me at school, and she invited me to her place at St. Peter's. I'll never forget it. I had 2 or 3 quick glasses of beer before I caught a cab there. I was 14, 15 maybe. Don't know where I got the beer from, but they were for courage. Yeah. Turned up. I knew she sort of liked me. Some of the girls were pushed. Anyway, loving it. Got there. Mum and Dad were there. Brother and sister. We spent the night just chatting away, playing games as you do at 14. At the end of the night, I went to the door and I thought, do I just give her a peck on the cheek? I don't know. What do I do here? Yeah. I mean, I was in a mess. Yeah. Got to the door. Was about to give her a peck on the cheek, and she went, "Oh no. Let me explain to you what that did to me." The cab was waiting for me. I walked from there to the cab, and I'll be careful with the language I use here, but I was beside myself. Yeah. I was horrified. Yeah. Not embarrassed, but I was devastated. It was like unbelievable rejection. Like it was like this massive, it was like all the rejection you've had in your life in one great big massive whack of burst. This way. And it took me a number of weeks. I took days off. I was depressed. Yeah. I was worried. I was concerned. I was crying. I mean, not uncontrollably, but in my head. Yeah. Now, is that normal? I don't think it is, but that's how it affected me. Yeah. And so again, long way around answering your question. I think rejection is something that for whatever reason, speaking in the third person here, I think that rejection is something that really triggers me.
Sure.
Really triggers me.
Yeah.
Whether it be sales, as I said to you before,
Yeah.
I'm selling now for Radio Tell You Know, when someone says, look, we love the station, but we don't, it's like a dagger in the heart.
Yeah.
That was not like a dagger in the heart.
Yeah.
That was worse.
Yeah.
So I think rejection is one thing.
Yeah.
And why I was like that, I don't know.
Yeah.
And as a result of that rejection, and again, I'm just guessing here because I don't know, but as a result of that rejection, as you guys would know, doing the work you're doing, when you're feeling, when there's something missing, or when you're feeling unwell, or you don't feel right, then there are a couple of ways around it. Either sort yourself out, in the traditional way, whatever that might be, or have a drink and get pissed, or have a bet, or have a joint.
It's filling a fundamental human need that is being unmet.
Yeah. And that was the way I probably did it and started doing it.
Sure.
And again, there was a question without notice, but I think that's one part of how a lot of these issues occurred, and how I eventually, became addicted to a number of things that in the end were no good for me at all.
Sure.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it made no sense to me.
No, it made perfect sense. And
in fact, could you repeat it back to me?
Look, I think a lot of people will actually relate to that, especially as young males. Like, I know that I was like that. Like, I was horribly insecure as a child, always trying to prove myself to others. It's something that I wasn't overly aware of at the time. I wasn't confident around women at all. And
well, there you go. I wasn't alone.
You spoke about your, for me, it was a 20-year reunion I went to as well. Spoke to an ex-girlfriend also. And
I bet she said she liked you and you never made a move.
No, we actually, I said to her, I was like, you were the one person in school that I actually felt safe around, that I felt cared for, that understood me.
Oh, good.
And
she was a girlfriend, was she?
She was a girlfriend,
at the time.
not for a long period of time, but it was interesting because she sort of said to me that she felt like I changed after that, and that I was unapproachable and too good for people around me.
In her mind, you did.
Well, other people, so there was this perception of me that was someone that was thinking I was better than other people around me. Maybe because I wasn't comfortable engaging, or maybe because I was insecure and I was always trying to do something better.
And that comes across as
for
being
people
aloof.
to notice me.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to feel noticed, I wanted to feel connected with people, and I wasn't getting that need met. So then, my way of trying to improve that was to do better. If I'm a better person, if I'm better at sport, then people will notice me. And
I understand that.
I'm noticing this more now. Like, this was probably a couple of years ago, and I've definitely sort of grown from that feedback and that experience, because I was horrified to hear that someone thought that when I was crying, like you, crying on the inside, like feeling this lack of self-worth and confidence. And for me, like, I've been doing some work, and I shared this with you yesterday with the Southern Men's Gathering, a not-for-profit association in Adelaide, and I'm volunteering, and I'm telling one of my stories at their event. It's upcoming in November, so only a month away now, from the 4th to the 6th down in
Sounds like a great organisation.
It is, and we've spent a year preparing for that, and going through this process of understanding yourself, understanding where different behavioural patterns came from in terms of your relationship with your father, with your siblings, with your mother, like the needs that weren't met, and then how you manifested a coping strategy for that. And 100%, one of mine was that, well, I've got to prove myself to people, I've got to prove my worth. And so in sport, and I'm going to guess, and I could be wrong, but media, like, in terms of, they carry a certain level of worth or status in society, right?
Persona, yeah.
And so when you start to do well at one of those things, people notice you for it, and it fills that gap, it fills that need, because you start to feel, I have self-worth.
Well, not with me, but
right.
in a general.
Okay.
But you're right, 100%. That wasn't me, and it's not some people in the media, and I certainly don't.
Not everyone.
I'm certainly not being. I mean, I think it's with anything, but just to go on that point, because it's worth exploring. I didn't like being noticed. I didn't like being recognised. I like the pay packet. I like the job, but I never strutted around. I say this quite sincerely. I never strutted around. In fact, my father said to me, "You got to be." I noticed when that lady came up to you and said, "Hello, Mark, we love you on TV." You felt you're a bit embarrassed, and that he said that might come across as being a bit aloof. You've got to play the game a bit more. And I said, "Well, I sort of do, Dad, but I don't want to go. Yeah, thanks, aren't I great?"
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I didn't like that side of it.
I guess when I say that, I'm talking more about feeling noticed and valued.
Yeah.
So when I use status because it's this perception of self-worth.
Yeah.
It's not actually self-worth.
No.
It's a replacement for it. And so what I wanted was to feel noticed and to feel valued. And I'm not sure if that was similar for you or you really just didn't want that attention at all.
I didn't want it.
Okay.
No. I honestly didn't want it. And again, just to make it clear, as you've now made that point clearer, if someone said to me, "You did really well, last night, that was a great performance," or "You hosted well," or "Gee, you were funny," of course you feel okay about that. But I didn't use that as a fuel to keep me going.
Sure.
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't. And I say that quite honestly. It wasn't something that, I didn't push it away.
Yeah.
And I didn't say, don't say that. But I didn't walk away with my chest puffed out. And
Yeah, sure.
Does that make sense
Yeah,
too?
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because I know it's a bit like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not sure whether others do or not. But
Yeah.
and since leaving the media in terms of on camera,
Yeah.
and obviously I do a little bit of radio, have I missed that notoriety? Not at all. If I go back in, I'll get it again. That's okay. I have not missed it. I haven't missed the freebies.
Yeah.
I haven't missed the notoriety.
Okay.
I haven't missed what comes with it,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that come with it. People want to buy you this, and I
Yeah.
mean, I'm still well known, but
Yeah.
they want to do this. They want to put you in a car, and they'll say, well, don't worry about paying for it. We just want you to
Sure.
drive. Or
Yeah.
I miss none of that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I miss none of
Yeah.
it. And some people do. Some people,
Yeah.
as we spoke about
Yeah.
the other day, some people fall in a hole as a result of losing that job because that job was their identity.
Yeah.
I left it under more tricky circumstances. It wasn't necessarily, it wasn't the right way I would have liked to have left. But the point is, even if I had have made the decision to leave because I would start a new business, I wouldn't go, but people aren't going to recognise me now. And I'm not going to get those freebies, and I'm not going to go to all those parties. I had no interest in any of that.
Cool. Okay.
None.
Yeah. It's
I
good
did them.
perspective.
I did them.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but I didn't miss any of that.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
don't miss any of that.
Do you and was that an always thing, or was that just something that as you grew a bit older and matured a bit that you had less of an inclination for, or was just never there in the first place?
I don't think it was ever there.
Yeah, right.
I really don't. I mean, in the early days, when I came back from Darwin, I came back in '83 and then did the '84 grand final. I was on the boundary first time working at the ABC on camera, and I had a bit of fun. There was a bit of a funny thing where the guy swore, Duncan Fosdyke swore, and that got a lot of coverage and all that. And then from there, obviously, I did more TV. I did a lot of radio. I called footy. Don't get me wrong. I love what I did, but even at that point, it was a job.
Okay.
It wasn't a job in the media for me.
Yeah.
Isn't this great? Aren't I great? No, I was never like that. Yeah. And I think I hope most people who know me within the media and know me generally, I hope, and I would be pretty confident that they'd say the same thing, in the sense that they'd say, no, he wasn't stuck up.
Yeah.
He wasn't. And I'm not saying everyone in the media is. I mean, you meet doctors like that, dentists, veterinarians.
You can't categorise people based on just one thing they do.
So I just make that point because, I have a lot of dear friends in the media, and the media has been wonderful to me. And so I guess the other thing that I need to make the point of is, I'm not saying that I didn't appreciate what I was doing. Don't get me wrong. I'm very lucky. It just didn't. And I did national stuff. I mean, I was thinking in fact, it was Bathurst this weekend.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, I did 10 Bathursts. I worked on 10 Bathursts on Channel 10's international coverage. And no, I wasn't the host and I wasn't the commentator, but I did comedy for them, and I did lots of roaming around, and I did the same for MotoGP. In fact, I hosted a lot of the stuff for MotoGP. I actually hosted it at the track at Phillip Island. I did 10 Melbourne Cups. I did the Olympics, the Commonwealth Games, the Sydney to Hobart. I did 10 Sydney to Hobarts. And again, when I say that, I don't mean I hosted the coverage, but I was involved in a significant way. And I'm not saying that to impress. I'm just simply saying that I did a lot of great stuff, and I'm appreciative of that. But I don't look back on it and say, "Oh, I wish I was there now."
Yeah.
Gee, I really miss that. Yeah. I appreciate it. But I've moved on.
Yeah.
And if I get an opportunity to do it again, well, then great. But if I don't, that's fine. One thing I don't want to do is I don't want to be constantly going, I really miss what I had. I've got to get back there some. Yes, of course I'd like to do commercial radio eventually again at some level. But if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. So I'm not trying to claw my way back. And I think that's a sign that suggests that I have moved on, at least psychologically, from what I had to what I've got now.
Yeah.
Which is a tick for me.
Absolutely. I mean,
It's a bumpy road, but it was a tick.
We talk about things.
A few
that,
potholes.
Like, a few potholes. That's one way of putting it.
A couple of large explosions.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's okay.
Yeah. Well, we talk about everything is constantly changing. Even when you have a source of pain, like if you try and point to that pain and you hold your finger in that spot, it won't be the same. Like when you give it your full attention, there'll be subtle changes in it. It might move slightly. It might go from being dull to sharp or something like that. So when we talk about trying to get back to something, you can't really go back to anything because it doesn't exist anymore.
No,
it's past its time, and so then
it's
not about not wanting to go back to it. Something is where do you want to move towards?
Well, that's right.
And it could be, like you said, it could be a commercial job in radio. It doesn't mean it was the commercial job in radio you had previously.
It'll be
it's just another, exactly.
It'll be different people,
Agreed.
different show, different era, different me.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's just a different way of thinking because often people, they're not thinking about it like that. They're thinking about the from a deep sense of loss, from a thing that they maybe they didn't value enough, or they did value a lot, and it was sort of taken away from them quite swiftly, and then it's like that regret, that sort of hole that's left after that.
What I would say, just as a little side thing here, is there were times during, I can remember talking to various journalists and our makeup lady and various cameramen when I was at Channel 10, particularly Channel 10, and particularly when I wasn't 100% well and things were starting to go downhill. There were times where I got very frustrated and I often said, this bloody job. One thing I would say to people is that, okay, sure, if you absolutely hate your job and it's not suited in any way, well then try and do something about that, be positive. Deep down inside, I love that job. I loved it at Channel 10 and in the media and all. I really did. But because of frustrations, which can happen, there were many times where I thought, bloody hell, got to be a better bloody job than this. I'd get quite annoyed. What I would say is I definitely know now how lucky I was, and that we should, particularly if it is a job that you're okay about and above, in other words, okay or love, try and understand, try and appreciate it then.
Yeah.
Because it's the same with, it's the old cliche. I mean, my wife, I'd love to be with Judith again. I didn't appreciate her while I had her. Now I yearn her because I understand how lucky I was. And it's the same with my job. So my message to those who are in a situation where they get a bit frustrated here and there, but they know in their hearts that they like the job, just understand, maybe put yourself 20 years into the future and think to yourself, and hopefully you'll think to yourself, I really appreciated that job because now I don't have it. I miss it.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Like I think we often just get caught up so much in the day-to-day sort of requirements of life. It's like you got to get up, you got to make breakfast, you got to do, prepare the kids, you've got to, get ready for work, you head to work and you come back at the end of the day and, you get a few more moments with the kids before they go to bed, and it's like...
Then it's on again for the next
day.
And
it is, and it becomes
this
sort of... It really is. It's like the hamster wheel of life, and somehow we need to develop sort of strategies for stepping outside of that from time to time, and maybe reimagining life in a way that doesn't require us to be inside that wheel as often as we are.
Yeah, and you've articulated that well, and to that end, I'd also say that my gratitude and appreciation for what I have now is totally different to how I felt about things, say, even 10 years ago when I was driving around in a $100,000 car. I owned, a $1 million home, and I had a beautiful family. I mean, I've still got Judith and Bridget. They still talk to me, which is wonderful. We get on well. So I had all these things, right? These glittering, what do you call them? Glittering things. Not just physically, but also that notoriety. But what I'd say there is that now, when I put my head on my pillow at night, snuggling up to Toby, I honestly feel blessed that I've got a pillow with a clean pillow sheet on it, and that I've got enough sheets to make sure that I'm warm, and that I have a beautiful dog, and that I have a bathroom that I can go to in the morning, even though I'm renting, where I can have a shower, a warm shower. So I appreciate all of those things that I didn't even give a second consideration to when I was working. and just on that treadmill, as you say, that treadmill of life. I just appreciate all those things a lot more. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, would I like to have a nicer car? I suppose I would. Would I like to own my own house again? Probably. Would I like to be able to go overseas like I did when I had money? Probably. But really, it's not life or death for me.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's not the thing that really feeds you.
It's not. It's not at all. I mean, of course I'd like to have you know what I'm saying? Of course I'd like to have things that are a bit more shiny, in a way, but nowhere near as much as... I have a totally different attitude to what it was like back then compared to now, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, amazing. So we've alluded a lot to that slippery slope and that time. Can we go and just sort of articulate that a little bit more for our audience and like really about sort of, you know, where that pivotal moment sort of became obvious to you and the decision to address it, and then, you know, where to from there?
Yeah, sure. So it was just a moment there where I was presenting sport with Rebecca, and I'd finished sport and I didn't feel very well, so I just went over to my desk, and then my my news director came over and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Not really." I said, "I don't know, I just don't feel that well." And I was going through a lot of stuff at that time. And look, you know, what I'm about to say now it'll sound pretty basic, but there was a lot of underlying other issues in my life, like everyone has, that helped build this up. There was a whole range of things going on, nothing illegal or anything, nothing bad, but just general stuff. And I can remember not feeling that well, so I went down. They took me downstairs, and we went downstairs, and I had a water down at the cafe downstairs with my two bosses actually, and I just lost it, and I started crying. And I don't know what I was crying about. I then rang my daughter. She picked me up, and I went home. And Judith was there, obviously, and I was just uncontrollable. I was really upset. I had no idea why. I sort of did, but I sort of didn't. I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, I recovered from that, and 2 days later I went back to work, and they very kindly offered me the opportunity just to come in and present sport, rather than coming in at 9. They said, "Look, we want to look after your health. Why don't you come in at 4, present sport? This is what we'll pay you." Anyway, about a week later we had an event, and I certainly got extremely drunk prior to the event, and then I got to a point where, you know, I had to leave the event, and it became apparent that I was really unwell and obviously inebriated in the case of people visually seeing me, but it was more than that. Yeah. I make no excuses, none whatsoever, and then the next morning, you know, it was apparent that I just couldn't work anymore at Channel 10. So I stopped working at Channel 10. And obviously that affected my family, that affected my daughter, my friends, people who watch me on TV, all of that sort of stuff. And then 12 months later I left 5AA because I was still working at 5AA. How I did that I'll never know, but I had to earn something. And then when I left 5AA, that's when things really went downhill, because I was not working at all. Judith and I had just split, so I had a little bit of money, and that's when I sort of went on some massive benders, and that went on for about 3 years. And you know, that was very unpleasant. I was living by myself. I had the money. You know, I was renting. I had the money because of the money split between the two, Judith and I. And so I was just in a world of pain. But on the outside, everyone saw me still as the funny, happy-go-lucky guy. That was all good. Had a beautiful dog. Had Jack. But you know, in a general sense, you know, I was in a bad way. Just going from bad to worse, really. You know, pretty well high all day, every day. Very unwell at night, and that cycle would continue. And then on this particular day, my sister rang. My best mate rang me, Brad, and said, "Do you want to go down to Glenelg for something to eat?" So I said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "Be there at 6." So I got there, and my sister was there. And they said, in a general sense, they said, "Look, we're very concerned about you. You know, we're very worried about you. We both love you. You know, we're here to help. What can we do?" Yeah. And again, I could go into all the details and that, but the point is, that was, I don't know, left there about 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. Next morning, I was walking Jack, I should say, at the park, 10 o'clock, about 9:30, 10 o'clock, a phone call came through from the owner of the Hayter Clinic, which was in Melbourne, because I'd that night gone home and got on the internet and looked around and made some emails and said, because we'd decided that I'd go to rehab.
Yep.
That's what we'd decided,
Yep.
which I left out, which is key. Next morning he rings, Jackson Oppie, lovely guy, like you guys, philosophical, helpful, sort of, into all of that sort of stuff, which is great. And anyway, we spoke for about 40 minutes. I probably cried for 30. He was hard. He knew who I was, but he didn't know who I was. He knew that he knew I had a profile, but he reached out and he said, I want to help you. And anyway, so he asked me some questions. Then it got pretty heavy, almost like it was my dad. He didn't care. He said, "You telling me a lie now, or how long are you using? Where you get your stuff from? What do you do?" I'm thinking, well, hang on. In the end, he said, "I got a room for you." Okay. He said, "Meet me in Melbourne when you arrive from Adelaide tomorrow." He said, "Get the 7 o'clock in the morning. Meet me. I'll be there at 10 o'clock to pick you up."
Wow.
So the next morning, I had to organise things with Jack and all that. I had to take him up to my sister's. And next morning, 10 o'clock, I arrived, got into the car, never met him before, shook his hand. He said, "How are you?" I said, "Yeah, good." He said, "How are you?" I said, "Shit." Obviously I'm shit. I'm sitting in the car with the guy who runs the bloody Hader clinic. What do you reckon? And he said, "No, you're not." He said, "You're good."
Yeah.
And he said, "The fact that you're here is great." And so we drove down to Geelong, had a great chat. And they've got a place at Geelong and also Essendon. So Geelong is like a concentration camp. I mean that in a nice way. Yeah. It's just stricter. Bed by 9, TV off by 8, no phones, no going out. Unless you go out, you go to the doctor, you take someone with, all that, which was good. Everyone cooks, very, very strict. Anyway, so I got there. I'll never forget it. I got there, got in the front foyer. Jackson said, "Hey, this is Mark Aiston." Everyone, "Hi, Mark, how are you? Good to hear you." And one of the guys come over, and then the lady behind the counter, "Hey, how you going? Yeah, how you going?" He said, "Mate, I just got to get a couple of things if I can." He said, mobile phone, yeah. So he said, "I've got to grab that." He said, "You've read the stuff, haven't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Got a computer?" He said, "I brought that." He said, "You can use that, but not here. You can use it in Essendon." But he said, "No worries." He said, "Anyway, you've TV." Yeah, worked in TV. Yeah, fantastic. He said, I had a look at a bit of you on, love your work, so this is how it's all going down. Yeah. And I'm thinking, this is easy, this is great. I reckon this is going to be okay. So anyway, this went on for about half an hour, and then they did some tests and checked, a range of things, that I wasn't coming in with anything and all that. Anyway, that was all fine. So he said, "Mate, all ready to go." Fantastic. He said, "Just wander through that door." He said, "I'll be there in a second." So I wandered through the door, right? And of course, everyone else is there sitting on a couch, right? They're watching TV. I think it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it was. Anyway, so that's okay. Wander in, guy walks over. He's one of the addicts. He said, "Mate, I'm Mark, I'm looking after you." He said, "Let me introduce you to everyone." So that was all fine. And then I said, "Mate, this is good." He said, "Yeah, it's pretty good." 2 minutes later, the guy comes through with the other girl, totally different. Totally different. There was no friendliness. It was about being committed. It was no talking over one another. It was about all these rules and regulations. Not stuff like you're scum and you all of that. Not putting you down, but just saying, "Mate, Mark, sorry, you got us at the moment. We're talking to everyone. You need to be part of this, mate. You're here for 3 months. It's not a holiday." Like, it was totally different to what, but it's what I needed. Yeah. And then I went to bed that night, and I do tell this story when I do my chats to people publicly. I went to bed that night, and I put my head on the pillow, and I thought, "My God, it's come to this." But then I stopped, and I thought, no, don't think that. Think what Jackson said to you in the car. Don't worry about it's come to this. Forget that. Park that. No, this is the start of the rest of your life. Yeah. And so I had to think that way. Now, have I been perfect from then to, I haven't used at all, but have I been perfect? Am I the perfect person just because I went to rehab and it's been 5 years and I haven't? No, of course not. I still go through frustrations. I'm still rude to people. I'm still undisciplined, a lot of things, but I'm certainly a lot better than I was, and I'm moving up rather than moving down. Yeah. So I want to make that point. And I think it's really important. I don't want people thinking, "Wow, what a great story. Mark did this, he was down here, then he went to rehab and he's great." Yeah. It doesn't work that way for me. Yeah. I don't want people to think, "Perfect, next time I see Mark, he's going to be great, everything's going to be cool." It's not like that. It's just that I'm more aware of the things I need to work on now, and I am working on them, and it's slow. I wish it was quicker. It's slow, but at least I'm heading in the right direction. I haven't plateaued. I'm moving in the right direction. Now, wherever that is in the end, I don't know, but at least I'm moving in the right direction. So that was my experience at the first day of rehab,
Outstanding.
which was totally different to the last day, where at the end of the 3 months, I had to do an interview with Jackson, because you had to sort of not prove, but you had to basically go through a process where you had to explain what you'd learned and what you were going to do in the future. And that was pretty rigorous. But I've got that on tape, and that and it was just totally different. Does that mean that when I came out of rehab and went home, everything was cool? No, but the point was I was on the right trajectory, which was good. And I often look back and I think, wow, how did that? You went to rehab. My God, if your dad was alive, they'd be horrified. But it is what it is. It is what it is. I mean, it's. Am I the only one? No. You know, will I ever be the only one that goes to rehab, or will I ever be the only one that has a major issue in your life where things fall apart and you lose everything, you've got to rebuild? No, no. So that was all really interesting.
It really is.
That little experience of getting there and getting into the place and meeting everyone and being there for 3, it was really interesting.
It's insight that most people won't go through in their own lives, or
Probably
they
not.
might not even be surrounded by it. So to hear a story like that and to be able to learn from an experience like yours, I mean...
Well, the interesting thing was too, I mean, I was with all sorts of addicts there, and there were all sorts of different characters. I mean, one was a guy who owned a pub in Melbourne. He was a lovely guy, family, addicted to cocaine. That was just the way it was. He was a lovely guy though. You know, and then there was a young girl who was an ice addict, who wasn't an ice addict in the true sense, that she had 2 businesses to run, and then something happened and she lost some money and she had to get a 3rd job, so she had to stay up later, so she started using ice to stay up later, and then she got addicted to it. So she wasn't the typical ice addict, but then there was a heroin addict who was a compulsive liar, no names, no pactor, compulsive liar. And then there was a guy who just spent the last 4 months in jail for beating a guy up because he broke into a house when he was off his face. Then there was an alcoholic, and then there was a sex addict, and then there was a whole range of other. It was very, very, very. It was a very unusual group of people. And do I keep in contact with them? One person I do, yeah. So the rest no. But the point is, I didn't feel uncomfortable with them. Because in a way, if you go back 40 years, they were the people I was knocking around with in Highland Street. They were exactly the people.
Yeah.
They were exactly the. Actually, interesting. The only addict person, the only person who wasn't in there that I would have related to even better was a gambling addict, but there was no gambling addicts in there. Maybe that's sort of not passe anymore.
Yeah, there you go. Mate, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and I really admire your willingness to be open about it and share it. Like to not, feel so tightly or so, to carry anything that says that I have to hide this from anyone, because it's actually a story of courage. Not
has its consequences though. Do you want to hear one?
You go
Briefly.
Yeah.
Well, and this is why a lot of people don't share their stories, because it can affect your opportunity to get jobs.
Yeah.
People will say to you, to your face, they'll say, mate, fantastic. Really proud of you, you're fantastic. Then they walk away and they go, he wants a job with us, just not sure. No, not sure. I get that, and I have no problem with that at all. So all I'm saying is, not everyone has to be like me and put their hand up and say this is what's going on, because it will have consequences in that way.
Yeah.
So I just want to make that point.
It also becomes a pretty good filter though, right? You're going to attract a really niche group of people now that can see beyond that.
Well, hopefully.
And you're going to surround yourself with more and more of those people, and that's what's going to bring more prosperity to life.
Well, hopefully, yeah. Look, absolutely. I mean, look, my dear friend, who's my best friend, said you should never have gone public with this because it's going to hurt you in the end. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. And if I had my time again, would I have done it? I don't know. Because obviously when I came out of rehab, a journalist at the Advertiser rang and said, we'd love to do a story. Yeah. And after a while I said, look, that's fine. It was 2 pages, full pages.
Wow.
And it was everything that I've just told you then and more. But, it did help a lot of people. Did it make me feel any better? I'm not really sure. But I know it helped a lot of people. I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for sympathy. I didn't do it to big note myself. I just simply did it because, as I said to you before the interview, you said, what message do you reckon? I just did it because I just want people to understand that these things can happen and creep up on you very quickly.
Yeah.
And then the whole world explodes, and some people don't make it back.
Yeah.
And I just want people to understand, if it's possible, that when things are starting to, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but when things start to go slightly askew, just be conscious of it and maybe take some action, because I don't want anyone to go through what I went through.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, it was the deepest of darkest holes, and I don't want anyone to go through that. It's just horrible. And it's horrible. It's not just horrible for me. It's horrible for everyone around you.
Yeah.
And in my case, it was quite public. So, you know.
Look, I admire you for your vulnerability and for the willingness to be open about it. I think it's a key trait of being authentic. It's something that I really appreciate people like that in my life. You've been very generous with us already, like just in the short time that we've known each other, and
thank you.
and
it's a pleasure.
Sharing things, and I commend you on where you are and who you are. And I'm not sure how you feel about that, but certainly I
take it on board.
Yeah, cool.
No, I take it on board. I really, mate, that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean it's great. Great what you guys are doing. I mean you obviously, I don't know you very well at all, but I just wish you weren't as tall as you were. It's a bit of a running gag, guys. As soon as I met this guy, he's about foot and a half taller. It just triggers me. Yeah. Not really. No, but clearly what you guys are doing is super worthy with individuals and groups and teams, and you should be commended for doing that too.
Yeah, I mean, we've all got our own stories, haven't we? And we've got ours of challenges and setbacks, and
totally
different to yours, and neither more important, or it's our story. We're the author of our own.
It's true.
Existence.
It's true. That's a
and if we can use that to be better
help
versions of ourselves and to help others.
Yeah.
You can get some fulfillment.
It's a double tick, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing around mutual benefit. Let's not leverage off each other. Let's look for the opportunity to sort of help celebrate, collaborate and build something that's better together.
That's great. Yeah.
So
words.
At the in terms of leaving listeners and audience with something at the end of this, how would you summarise this? I imagine you've done this in talks and stuff before, but what are the key points that you'd want people to walk away with after this chat?
Well, as I said earlier, a couple of moments ago, maybe I got ahead of myself, because what I just said earlier, and I'll repeat it, is probably the most important thing, and that is that, and it's it's easier said than done. I understand that. It's easy to articulate this, but it's difficult to do. But if you feel as though things are not quite right, rather than leave them, or rather than, I don't want to simplify this either, but rather than leave them and just hope that it all goes away, or rather than taking up an addiction, or sort of increasing an addiction, rather than doing that, just take time, think about it, think carefully about how bad this could get, which I know is negative, but hopefully that will give you even more strength to maybe think, well, maybe this is not for me. Maybe this is heading in the wrong direction. I sort of feel okay, but maybe this is heading the right. And so if you get to that point, then just talk to someone. Yeah. Because I didn't do it, you see. Just talk to your wife. You don't want to burden them, but you'll burden them in a big way if you don't, and in 2 years' time the whole thing collapses. Just talk to them. Or talk to your brother, or your sister, or your friend, or go and see your doctor. Just talk to someone initially, and then work out where you're going to head, whether it be seeing a doctor or a psychologist, or whatever it might be. That's not... But just as importantly, if you see someone that you feel is... And again, this is a little trickier. We spoke about this the other day, because I'm not an expert at this, and I don't profess to be. But if you see someone that maybe is not quite, right, then maybe, and again, I'm not an expert at the patter here, but what I'd do is I'd go over and say, mate, how are you? Are you okay? And if they say I'm fine, well, I'm not sure what to do after that, to be honest. But if they say, well, not really, well, then there's an opportunity for you to talk. But I guess the most important thing is that if you get the opportunity to talk, you can't be an expert. And don't give them advice in the sense of, well, have you thought of medication or what? But in a general sense, just maybe nudge them to have a chat to someone who's close to them. Yeah. And that will, again, at least get the process moving. Yeah. At least it'll get the process. And then What happens after that, I guess, to a large degree, is up to them, because if I had have sat with my sister and my best mate and they'd have said, why don't you go to rehab? And I had have said, I'm fine. What do you mean? Yeah. You have to be self-aware enough to know that you can't be in denial. Yeah. And if you are in denial, then it makes it more difficult. And I'm not quite sure about the answer to that. I don't know. If someone's in self-denial, I'm not sure what the answer is. I don't know how you handle that, but if they're willing to listen, at least you've got a chance.
Yeah, for sure. Like I admittedly got emotional when you said that about your sister and your best mate sitting you down, because to me, again, that's true human connection. Like, that's true care. That someone had that willingness to put themselves in a comfortable position.
Totally.
To say something that doesn't come easily, because of deep care for who you are.
Totally. And then I lived with her for 3 years after that. Seriously, when I came out, I lived with her for 3 years. She said, just come and live with me.
Yeah, fantastic.
I mean, I had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I was almost homeless in a way.
Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, it was. And it was an emotional meeting. And if I remember correctly, I think I had the spaghetti bolognese. No, but it was an emotional meeting. Yeah. And you're right. You know, when you really analyse that, it was about two people who deeply care. And also two people who, and this is important, two people who will say, Mark, get back on track. Yeah. They don't bullshit to me. Yeah. They don't patronise me. If Kathy's annoyed with me for a reason, there hasn't been a lot of reasons lately, but it still can happen, she won't say, yeah, it's fine, Mark, don't worry about it, just keep doing it. She'll say, mate, as your sister and someone who loves you, that's not right. Yeah. Or, have you thought of something else? Let's chat. That's true care. Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing that I mean, for me, that's all that I search for, like that connection with people, that care. It's something that throughout my injury and my 6 operations and stuff, the people that, you know, identifying that inner circle, that support network, and the people that are true, honest with you, they're there for you in those hard moments. Like,
you can't buy that.
You can't. Like, it's.
Although I did pay for the meal that night, which is quite annoying, really.
Come on, let's not diminish the message with humour, but
no. Let me say no, that's a good point. But let me say that without humour, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
But I take your point.
No, it's not a criticism. I guess I'm just, you know, it is something special when you can do that, because you know, we all have our limits, and especially when someone's spiraling out of control, that can be difficult to be around. And when you know, you understand how far someone's willing to go for you because of their care for you, that's a pretty special thing.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So, Mark, tell us a little bit about where people can sort of find you. Obviously, out at Radio Italia Uno.
Yeah, if they just want to hang around out the front. They can just sort of loiter out the front.
Yeah.
Well, I'm at Radio Italia Uno. I mean, that's fundamentally my main job, and I do a little bit of media training. You know, not a lot. I do a few talks, not a lot.
Yeah. You've got your online course.
I have an online course.
So where can people find that?
Well, thank you for that. I didn't expect you to promote that. That's on a platform called mastermind.com, and it just helps people. It's a small course, 4 hours, teaches people how to promote themselves through the media. So fundamentally, it teaches you how to be your own public relations firm within your business. Go to a public relations firm if you want to, that's fine. But if you want to do it yourself...
But not for $99.
No, well, 97.
$97,
sorry.
Well,
that's true. $97,
yeah.
But if you buy it from the US, it costs you $140 because of the... Anyway, as I found out just recently, it didn't cost me that, but whoever bought it paid $140. But anyway, they were happy with it.
Right.
They were from
you
Chicago.
Have to do some more marketing in the US then.
Well, I'm doing some... Well, interestingly, I'm actually doing some work at the moment, which is quite exciting, with a guy who looks after entrepreneurs. And he coaches them. He actually one-on-one, well, not one-on-one, he has a group of 20. And he found out about me in some way, shape or form, one group I was in. And so I was actually part of his group last Wednesday, where I talked to them about promoting themselves, which was great. I loved it. And I love coaching. I love teaching. I really do. And so we just did that over Zoom. You know, there's a guy from Chicago, Illinois, New York, wherever it was, I don't know. It was great, you know, and they loved my accent. They loved it. And so that was a bit of a buzz, but that's what I do, and you know, I just try to be as best I can. You know, I still fall over, but I have my dog. I have Toby, who's the love of my life. I have some great friends, obviously Kathy, my brother, my beautiful daughter, former wife, who I still talk to. I love dearly. Yeah. You know, David's a good mate of mine from Melbourne. I don't have a lot of friends. Cam, dear friend of mine in radio. And, you know, I have acquaintances, but yeah, I just have a small group of friends, and that's what I do. And I watch not a lot, but late at night I sit up and watch a few Netflix programs, which does relax me.
Yeah.
Does relax me. I'm watching a thing at the moment called, it's actually on Stan, Better Call Saul.
Yeah, you mentioned that the other day.
So
yeah, I'm still yet to go back and watch Training Day. So you've got to
yeah, with Denzel.
Yeah.
Is that Denzel
Yeah.
Washington?
Yeah.
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 So
Absolutely.
anyway, so that's what I'm doing, and trying to lose a bit of weight, and I'm trying. Here you go. I'll leave you with this. So I'm smoking, as you know, smoking cigarettes, and I'm trying to give them up. Trying, okay. Technically, you either do or you don't, but I'm going to get on top of that.
Yeah, terrific.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you so much.
That's
I appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Good man.
That was good.
And
So shall we record some of that?
there's that humour.
Oh, it was being recorded.
So if you've been listening today and you've related to that story and you're looking for more information, obviously you can go find Mark. If you're in media, you can go and do his online course, but you can also head to the show notes and find our ebook. So free ebook, and it's how to go from surviving to thriving, and
Love
some
it.
of those tools that are in there
Love it.
hopefully be helpful for others that are trying to find their own path. And
Fantastic.
yeah.